Hello, Emerson family and friends. This is Miss Kiwi, and we're gonna read another book. Today we're gonna read Curious George Visits the Library. I love libraries. All right, let's begin. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Today, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, were at the library. George had never been to the library before. He had never seen so many books before either. Everywhere he looked, people were reading. Some people read quietly to themselves, but in the children's room, the librarian was reading out loud. Kind of sounds like what I'm doing, huh? I'm just not a librarian. It was a story hour. George loved stories. He sat down with a group of children to listen. The librarian was reading a book about a bunny. George liked bunnies. Behind the librarian was a book about a dinosaur. George liked dinosaurs even more. He hoped she would read it next. But the next the librarian read a book about a train. George tried to sit quietly and wait for the dinosaur book to be read. But sometimes it's hard for a little monkey to be patient. I know some wiggly people in my life that were like that. When the librarian started a story about a jungle animals, George could not wait any longer. He had to see the dinosaur book. He tiptoed closer. "Look, a monkey!" shouted a little girl. The librarian put her fingers to her lips. "We must be quiet. Everyone can hear," she said nicely. "But there's a monkey," said the boy. The librarian nodded and smiled. She agreed. When she finished reading the jungle story, the librarian reached for the dinosaur book. Where did it go? And where was George? Where did George go? George was all ready to take the dinosaur book home and read it with his friend when another book caught his eye. This book was about trucks. George wanted to take it home too. And here was a book about elephants. George loved elephants. He added it to his pile, thinking he's finding a lot of books. George found so many books. He soon had more than he could carry. He leaned against a shelf to rest. Squeak! Went the shelf. Shh! Said a man. Squeak! Went the shelf again, and it moved. Why, it wasn't really a shelf at all. George had found a special cart for carrying books. Wow, what luck! Now George could carry all the books he wanted. He rolled the cart between the shelves and stacked up book after book about boats and kites and baking cakes. He climbed higher to reach books about cranes and planes. Goodness gracious, so many books. What's he going to do with them all? At last, George had all the books he could handle. He couldn't wait to head home and start reading. And right in front of him was a ramp leading to the door. George was curious. Could he roll the cart all the way home? I don't know if that's a good idea. What do you all think? Down the ramp George went. The cart rolled faster and faster. "Stop!" a librarian volunteer shouted. "Come back with my cart!" But George was too excited to listen. The cart was picking up speed, and George was having fun. Ooh, I don't know, sometimes some fun's good. Until a crash. George and the cart ran smack into a shelf of encyclopedias. And so did George. He landed in a big pile right between O and P. Goodness, goodness, goodness. "Oh, no," moaned the volunteer when he saw the mess George had made. "How am I going to put all these books away?" "I'd like to borrow this one," said a boy from the story hour. "And I'll take this one," said a girl. With help from George and the children, the books were sorted in time. Soon there was just a small pile of George's favorites left over. Well, isn't that so friendly and nice of them all to help? "Would you like to take those books home with you?" the volunteer asked George. Then he took George to a special desk and helped him get his very own library card. George was holding his brand new card when his friend arrived with a stack of books of his own. "There you are, George," he said. "I see you are all ready to check out." George and his friend gave their books up to the librarian. She smiled when she saw George's pile. "I was wondering where this dinosaur book went," she said. "It's one of my favorites, too." The librarian stamped the books and handed them back to George. With his books under one arm, George waved goodbye to the volunteer, the librarian, and the children from Story Hour. "Come see us again, George," the librarian said, waving back. "Enjoy your books." And he did. Look at that. The end. Wasn't that a sweet book? Well, I will go ahead and see you all in the next book reading. Have a great time.